雷の呼吸一の型霹靂一閃
What is happening, my fellow weebs? Cowboy here, and welcome to my Katana build for Nioh 2. Now, Katana is a very beginner-friendly weapon in my experience. You have a lot of kind of the basic masteries of learning a character in Katana. You learn how to parry, you learn how to manage your ki effectively, and while it's a stronger defensive weapon in my experience, it also offers one of the most potent, damaging skill abilities in the game with EI Quick Draw. So with all of that in mind, I wanted to create a build that was both beginner-friendly that you could create in New Game, but also had the potential to scale into something greater in New Game Plus. And with that, today I bring to you the Lightning God build. Now, as you can probably guess from the opening and the title, this is a build heavily based around lightning damage. To help our lightning damage, we're actually going to be taking advantage of two separate set bonuses. So to do the quick overview before the deep dive, we are running the 5-piece bonus on Warrior of the West for 15% melee damage versus electrified enemies. We're running the 6-piece on Golden Boy for 15% lightning damage and 20% melee damage versus electrified enemies. We have a Thunderstorm Oni B core for an extra 4.1% elemental damage, and a Yudo core for an anima bonus based on elemental attack, and Shinroku for 15% more lightning damage and anima bonus when enemies are electrified. And all in all, this just comes together to create an absolute monster of a build, because for those that don't know, when you inflict enemy with lightning and they're electrified, it's almost like a discount version of Sloth. It's going to slow down their movement, it's going to slow down their attacks, and when you add that in with the hyper mobility low stance of Katana, you have a build that is incredibly beginner friendly, that has great survivability, despite being in lower weight gear for a solid chunk of your pieces. So, to jump into the deep dive, first up, let's talk about the Golden Boy set, because this is what you would use to kind of create a variant of this build on your first playthrough of the game. Now, the Golden Boy set can actually be gotten pretty early. First, you're going to have to finish the main mission that you see right here in the second region, the Hidden Monsters of Okehazama. The boss for this mission is actually Imagawa, who you can fight right here. Now, after you complete the mission, you unlock this side mission. And in this side mission, there's essentially two, I almost want to call them elite enemies that you need to dispatch. After them, the fog wall will go down, and you can just run on into the boss. If you've watched the tutorial I put up on smithing text farming, you can apply those exact principles here. Essentially, killing those enemies to clear the fog gate, resting at the shrine, fighting the boss. If you don't get the text, you quit to menu, return back to the shrine, fight the boss, and you can do this over and over again until you get the smithing text to drop. Now, as for the other smithing texts, the ones for stuff like Wave Swimmer, Warrior of the West Bow, Warrior of the West Set, these are going to come into the build in New Game Plus. From the testing the community's been doing, it seems like a lot of the end game bosses in New Game Plus actually drop sets from the original Nioh. I ended up getting this off Deidara Bochi, the plans for it, whereas off of Shootin' Doji, I got the plans for the bow, as well as the Warrior of the West set. So I don't think it's just one or the other. I know I've seen a bunch of plans drop off of Shootin' Doji, including like the Raging Bull set from the original. So pretty much any set from the original Nioh that you haven't found off of a typical enemy in this game, there's a chance it's going to drop off one of those end game bosses. So in reality, whichever one you find the easiest to farm, I suggest killing that one. Shootin' Doji is actually not too bad because you can sprint straight on over to him, and he has a lot of down periods with all of his drunken stumbling. So keep that in mind. But until you're able to work in the Warrior of the West, there's actually quite a few things you could do. Even with just running the Golden Boy set, we only need the 6 pieces to get the electrified enemy bonus, and that's the main thing that we want out of this. Beyond that, you could work in a set to increase your flowing shadow damage. You could work in pieces from a set to increase your moon shadow damage. Pretty much any katana ability that you're fond of that you find a set bonus for, you could work on in. Or you could just stick with the main pieces of the set and run a random lightning katana to make things work for you in New Game. Now, moving on into specific stats on gear, some obvious ones here. You're going to want to imbue your weapon with lightning. We have quite a few things that can put lightning on our weapon, but despite that, I still think it's important to have it imbued because you're not going to want to have to use papers constantly. Attack bonus heart is kind of a no-brainer here. That's going to get you a huge boost since heart is the main scaling stat on the katana, and as you'll notice, I've also remodeled this weapon to remove the scaling on both skill and strength and make it focused purely on heart, so the majority of my damage comes from getting heart as high as possible. Also, you're going to want shock accumulation. You want to get shock accumulation on ideally your weapon and on both of your accessories to maximize the chance of getting lightning on an enemy. Now, this build is obviously going to shine the most when you can get shock on an enemy. There are some enemies that are going to be immune to shock. That's just the nature of things. But at the same time, there's going to be enemies that are immune to water. There's going to be enemies that are immune to fire. With the nature of an elemental build, it's just something you have to deal with. And at the end of the day, if you know what you're doing with Katana, you can still dispatch a boss even if it's immune to a specific element. You know, you're not useless if something is immune to lightning. In a similar fashion, you're not useless if something is immune to poison or paralysis or whatever the case is. At the end of the day, these are facilitators to make the build stronger. They're not something that's going to, make you steamroll the entire game. So anyway, moving on, you're going to want to get the dual blades from Golden Boy set. You're not going to be using these because it's a Katana build, obviously. So these are strictly here just to help you get the set bonus. In a similar fashion, Warrior of the West bow and Master Archer's bow for set bonuses. Now, I want to point out a correction from the previous video. I talked about familiarity bonus A on ranged weapons. That was actually a mistake. It's agility bonus you need. I don't know if they had changed it or whatnot. There was a lot of different conflicting information on the subreddit, but what it basically comes down to is damage bonus agility and damage bonus equip weight will actually help your weapon, whereas damage bonus familiarity will only help boost the weapon that it's on. So damage bonus agility on your primary ranged weapon is a solid choice. One other nice synergy here is, since we're going to be using the Warrior of the West bow for the majority of the time, we also get that 20% bow damage from Golden Boy set, making this bow quite beefy. Moving on into the gear itself, obviously since there's a lot more builds coming, I decided to save the majority of my Umber sight and just kind of go for the basics. But as you know from the dual blade video, you just want to go for stuff that you like. Key bonus and Rita Gauge life are solid choices here. Toughness and defense bonus. Right here we have defense. Attack defense sword is one of the only real ones that's important. Obviously you should try and roll attack, and if you can, it's ideal to inherit attack onto every piece of gear, but that's getting into a level of min-maxing that's really beyond the scope of what this video is about. Here we have some faster wind recovery in life. Here we have toughness, defense, all that stuff. Yashikana, as always, if you can get shock accumulation on here, you can also roll lightning or elemental damage on it as well. Once again, there is no concrete place to farm this. There's rumors floating around that if you beat the final boss on New Game Plus, he drops one guaranteed. I am not up to him yet. I'm pretty close, so I'll be able to confirm or deny those rumors myself in the coming days. But in the meantime, just keep farming New Game Plus and hopefully you get it. Similarly, right here we have shock accumulation for enemy. Ran out of my higher end Umbra sight, so I didn't roll elemental damage onto this as well. Now moving on down. Next up, we have a little bit of a change in focus here. As a secondary to this build, you can focus either Omyo or Ninjutsu. Ninjutsu is going to give you access to Raijin Feathers, which will allow you to call down a ton of lightning onto an enemy. This has a very, very high chance to inflict Electrified almost immediately, which is why we're using it. Alternatively, you could use the Thunderstorm Talisman in Omyo. That is also a decent choice, and that's the point I'm making here. This build can be supplemented heavily with Ninjutsu or heavily with Omyo, as both have access to lightning. We're still going to want to pick up Barrier Talisman and Lightning Talisman from Omyo, but if you want to work in Thunderstorm shots or just the Thunder shot in general, you could do that instead of investing heavily in Ninjutsu. If you do go the Ninjutsu route, like I did, you could also work in some Water Feathers to help proc up confusion on an enemy in certain boss cases. You have extra quick exchange you can put on, you have more Tiger running, and then we have Eagle Eye, which is going to increase your bow damage, which obviously synergizes with the 20% increase we already have, to allow you to snipe a majority of enemies before the battle even starts. Moving on into our spirit, Shin Roku. Even though this is a Honda spirit that typically is seen with spear, it actually works great here. We have 15% lightning damage and anima bonus on electrified enemy. Great synergy with the build we have going. I have a Kasha Soul Core on. The main reason for this is it has anima bonus enemy electrified. That's something you're going to want to try to find. There's a bunch of different Soul Cores that could have this, but it just works excellent because it's on this one. Also, this is a pretty good Soul Core for inflicting Scorched on enemies, so once again, since I'm already having enemies electrified, this just gives me some synergy and ease in getting up confusion. Onyudo Soul Core is excellent here because we get anima bonus on elemental attack, and in a similar fashion, the Thunderstorm Oni B Core gives us another boost to elemental damage and an anima bonus on elemental attack. Now this one's kind of hard to farm, because you need to kill the electric heads in particular. But what's awesome about this is the Yokai ability you have, Fire Reinforcement. It's essentially a free lightning scroll. The effect is almost identical to the lightning talisman, except it just uses up anima. And so we're getting anima from doing elemental attacks, and then we're using this to imbue ourselves with elemental attacks, and it just goes on and on and on, and you can kind of see the synergy here. It works out pretty well. Moving on into the secondary, as with most builds, we're just going to be using Mikami here. He's going to give us more final blow damage, which is always a safe bet no matter what. As for the skills in particular, a couple main skills I want to point out. EI Quick Draw, work all the way up to 3. This is going to let you instantly go into your Quick Draw stance after you do a Key Pulse. In a similar way here, Flowing Shadow, another one you want to work towards. This ability is awesome at shattering the ki on humanoid enemies, great for circling around bigger yokai abilities, and solid damage overall. Down here we have Morning Light, which is a great wake up move, and in addition we have Sword of Discernment and Shadow Sword. These are great for shattering ki on enemies along with Sword Ki. In the low stance, we're going to go towards Swift Step for 2 reasons. One, we want to pick this up to get access to the Shadow Strike passives, as dealing damage from behind is kind of a core tenet of Katana, and also this is going to give you a lot of mobility. You already have a kind of side dash dodge and your low stance going left or right. This is going to allow your forward dodge to actually circle all the way around the enemy, just giving you that much more ability. It's almost like a discount yokai counter in the amount of mobility you get from this. Moving into mid stance, you have 2 real choices. If you like L1 and square for your counter, we have Haze 2. If you want to go L1 triangle, you have Water Shadow 2. Water Shadow is stronger than Haze. However, Haze, you need the L1 square here, which means you could keep Sword Ki on your triangle move. In my case, I use Sword Ki only in low stance, I use Flowing Shadow in high stance, and I prefer Water Sword to be in mid stance. So I opted with Water Sword, but if you prefer the Haze combo, you can certainly go for that. We're not going to be doing much in the upper tree here. We're going to be picking up Morning Moon, and that's really it. Rule of Thrusting, this actually has synergy with stuff like Kunai and whatnot, but we're not using a lot of the thrusting attacks with swords, so we're not all that worried about this. Sword of Serenity here. This obviously goes off of Sword Ki, so a great move to follow on up and break ki of opponents. An obvious synergy as we're going to be moving into Sword of Execution, which is the Mystic Art of choice in my opinion here. You could go for Sword of Salvation, but to be honest, once you're really experienced in your weapon, I don't think this is really necessary. You want to be going for damage. Now, 2 things I want to discuss here are going to be Tiger Sprint and Night Rain. We actually have a 20% boost to Tiger Sprint with the set we have running. Despite that, it's still just kind of a trash can ability. It was a trash can in the original, it's still a trash can here. It just doesn't do good damage. An EI Quick Draw is hitting anywhere from 3,000 to 3,500, while this was hitting for roughly 1,000, just to give you a perspective. Now, Night Rain has potential to be really strong, but it requires the enemy to stand there and tank all the hits from it. And if you're going to run Night Rain, there's a different set you should be running that will help to boost the damage of Night Rain in particular. I would suggest subbing that in place of Warrior of the West, which should be pretty easy if you have your Yashikana Magatama. As for skill customizations, on Morning Moon, I like having extra ki recovery since it's a high stance finisher. I want back as much as possible. EI gets the heart boost here to make it as strong as possible. Flowing Shadow, I have water imbuement just to help get water on the enemy in certain cases. Actually, do I have fire imbuement? That might work well too. I don't have it yet. That's fine. We'll keep water. This can usually get up water with 2 Flowing Shadows if the enemy doesn't die first from that. And the last one I want to point out is whatever stance you have Sword Ki on, you should definitely put on Masterful Slice. This is going to allow your Sword Ki to just decimate humanoid enemies and blow the majority of their ki away. As for our stats, Heart obviously is your primary stat here. You want to get that up as high as possible. While you're leveling, this should be the main stat you're putting the majority of points into. If you have a Yashikana, both Courage and Magic need to be up to 9. Now, since some of the pieces of armor we're running are heavy, we are going to need a decent amount of stamina, but first I would suggest getting strength up to 17. 17 strength is the threshold for one of the abilities on Shinroku, so you're going to want to go up to 17 strength, and then beyond that, 33 stamina will help get you under that 70% agility threshold. We have a hefty amount of Constitution. Constitution essentially is a dump stat after you get your heart maxed out, and then as I mentioned here, you can either focus on Dexterity or Magic. Dexterity if you like the lightning feathers there, Magic if you want to work in lightning shots or the thunderstorm shots. So having covered everything, let's jump on in here. We are actually going to do a later game mission here in Dream. A lot of people were like, oh, well, The Gozuki is an easy enemy. That's not fair. So this one should be a good example for this build. It's like a half co-op mission. We fight along with a guy, and then at the very end, we fight that guy we fought along with. But this mission has a variety of different yokai, so it'll give you a good idea of how this build handles itself in a wide variety of situations. This is the one, yep. This guy is useless. You can see, just check out the mobility of this. This is nuts. Oh no, we got grabbed. Now obviously, as you can see, we are squishy with this build. This is not a build designed around having a lot of self-sustain. But as you can also see, the second we get electrified status up on enemies, they pretty much just melt. And what's great is while they're melting, they're also slow, so it's like a double win. In terms of enemies that are basically immune to lightning, there's really not that many. You'll find it very difficult to get lightning on something like, is it coming towards me? No, it's coming towards him. You'll find it hard to get lightning on something like Warrior of the West or Warrior of the East. It'll be pretty hard to get lightning on. Obsidian Samurai, it's hard to get lightning on. This is just low stance. And this is Final Region New Game Plus. So, I mean, as you can imagine, I expect to take some hits here. But, I mean, this build we haven't struggled at all. Put a fresh one of these on. Put a fresh one of these on. Thank you for the lightning. Ooh, missed my parry. Boom. So that is going to wrap things on up for the Lightning God build. Now, obviously, we have a poll actually going on the community page for what type of build we're going to go for next. Just to check real quick, see what we're at on that. Let's see. I think Odachi is. Yeah, right now Odachi is in the lead, and then Hatchets, Tampa, and Spear are all tied for third place. So probably expect an Odachi build next, and then after that, the rest of the weapons will be coming your way. But either way, guys, thanks for coming on by and checking it out. Hopefully you liked the build. I know this is a lot more involved than the last build, but you know, definitely wanted to show off something that I thought was friendly for new players as well, since the last build was very much a New Game Plus focused build. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys next time with more Nioh 2.